As a dad, I don't have an overabundance of time to play video games, but I definitely still do. However, the type of games I've played have kind of hyper fixated on one that I've played for a long time, but it's never been kind of the primary thing like it's been over the past year. And that's been sports and racing games. You can kind of lump them together, say racing is a sports game, but I would argue that it's kind of its own entity. Nowadays, the video games that I play have to meet a certain criteria that I've laid out, because realistically, these are the only games I'm probably going to be able to make time to play. And of course, primarily needs to be a game that's acceptable for my daughter to see should she end up in the room when it's being played. So I don't play anything gory, violent, anything like that anymore. I pretty much stick strictly to E-rated games, which is actually easier than you probably think it is, because there are a ton of great E-rated titles, especially if you're willing to go back, 20 years in the catalog, like I definitely am. But it also needs to be a game that I can pick up and put down in a moment's notice. It's now been years since I subscribed to Xbox Live Gold or Game Pass or anything like that. I just simply didn't play games much online before, and I most definitely won't touch them now because I can't get tied up in a game that I can't pause. And of course, there's some single player games that fall to this fault as well. It might put you in a session where you kind of have to complete something before you can reach a save spot, or alternatively pause the game and leave the console on perpetually, potentially for hours, which I don't want to get stuck doing either. The current generation of consoles, of which I own just the Xbox Series S, I think it's pretty nice for the money, does have a very nice feature in its quick resume. However, quick resume is not supported on every single game, and some games seem like they utilize it better than others, as others can be a bit slow to jump back in, and maybe that's just a problem with the Series S. But regardless, it's an improvement over the 360 or PS3 generation, where most definitely you were relying on a save spot and shutting off the console if you wanted to retain any of your progress. However, this is something that's always been much better on handhelds. And of course, handhelds feel like they're making a resurgence for a lot of reasons, but one reason why I would want to see a handheld continue to be produced by Nintendo, and I think this will be the case, I think it's unquestionable that there'll be another Switch sort of hybrid console, is because these systems are going to have a home screen that you can just simply pause the game to, lock the screen, and pick it back up later. We saw this in the DS, we saw it even on the PSP. I mean, these are consoles that came out almost 20 years ago, handhelds that have sort of a quick resume feature in the fact that you can just fold the DS closed and fold it back open later and pick up exactly where you left off. Even games that have, frequent auto-saving or maybe have quick resume are not as fast as just flipping a DS closed, and as a parent, that's extremely important to me. These days, I'm not too concerned about the graphics. Ultimately, if the game comes out on the Switch and the Xbox Series S and it plays decently at most on the Nintendo Switch, I'm going to go with that version because odds are it's going to be the one that's going to be much easier for me to pick up and play for short bursts of time, in addition to the fact that these Nintendo Switch games oftentimes do not have a reliance on the internet. I think the Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare game is a great example. I loved the first Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare game back on the Xbox 360, but I didn't like how the game was tied down to this online service and didn't have much in the way of offline options. I think the second game might have had some bots matches, but the Battle for the Neighborville game, the most recent one, does not have any sort of online components. On the Xbox One, Series S, PS4, you get the idea. But on the Nintendo Switch, there is a offline mode that was made specially for the Nintendo Switch version because they have to accommodate the fact that this is a handheld, and ultimately you're not going to have an online connection all the time while you're playing it. Now, there are some Nintendo Switch games that do go the way of requiring internet connection. Obviously something like Fortnite, but it's a free-to-play game oftentimes when this is the case, and those are concessions that you can give up on the Nintendo Switch when it is a free-to-play game anyhow. But the ultimate example of a pick-up-and-play nature in gaming isn't even something that's often officially released. I mean, occasionally it is, and we'll get into that, but it's save states in the form of emulators. The Dolphin emulator, for instance, you can be chilling playing a GameCube game. You can lock in a save state on that GameCube game. You can just, have a button combination on your controller to get the save state, and then you can resume from that save state at any point later on. I mean, besides all the options that emulators give you, all the upscaling that's available to make the games look better, maybe the biggest selling point for me today on any emulator is the fact that save states make it possible to just simply save the game anywhere at a moment's notice in games that originally were not designed for this to be the case. Obviously, back on the GameCube, all the games were using, maybe a form of auto-saving, or they were using manual save points, but with Dolphin, you're able to create those save states, and you can do this with practically any emulator for any console that has emulation, essentially. In modern gaming, where there's autosaves just happening in the background, and I'm often left unsure if there actually was a save, and maybe the game forgoes having a manual save option altogether, which makes it be even more concerning to me if my progress is actually being retained. It's really refreshing to be on an emulator, to be able to hit a button combination and just save the game instantly. And of course, we've seen save states in some official capacities, like the Nintendo Switch Online service uses it for the classic games, but I wish we could see it in more than just classic games. Give me the ability to manually save a game literally anywhere in the overworld. Just anywhere. I mean, there are very few games, I feel like, when you think of the whole scope of modern gaming, that have given us the ability to do that. And as a parent, as somebody that's busy, as somebody that's got to stop playing at a moment's notice, I feel like that's an absolute shame. But it's another one-up for emulation and why I think that that's worthwhile in pursuing and then checking out on your devices, because ultimately it can be a much better gaming experience compared to playing on original hardware. So the next time I pick up a controller to play a game, I gotta think to myself, how easy will this be to get in and out of playing? Because ultimately that became a very big factor for me and determinant in what type of games I play. And it's not a bad thing. It's a great reason to revisit some older titles and maybe a little bit more selective about what newer games I buy. Like I talked about in the last video, be very picky about when I buy them, because picking up the definitive edition of the Avengers game for $6 was a great deal compared to buying it all pieced out separately. If you didn't take a look at that video, I will have a link to it here on the screen. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.